Over the past few years, I've been testing countless HDMI devices for just about every scenario you could imagine: switching, splitting, audio extracting, and capture card compatibility. I've been covering them all on RetroRGB.com as they're tested, but I wanted to put together one video that summed up all my findings. So let's take a look and see what I found. Okay, gotta start us out with some disclaimers as well as some very important information about the devices I'm about to review. First, this video is not sponsored in any way, no one paid me to make it, and I purchased every single thing that I'm showing in this video with my own money. Now, there's going to be affiliate links in the description because I'm not a moron. However, there's another reason I suggest that you use those links other than supporting the channel, of course. Devices like this have a tendency to change over time, especially when we're in the midst of a global part shortage. So I want to make sure that everybody both gets exactly the one that I'm testing, as well as purchases it from a place that allows returns for no cost. Both of those are important to me, so please make sure to use those links. Also, not a single device that I'm showing here adds lag at all, not even a little bit. In order to test lag, I use a device called the Time Sleuth that sends a signal down an HDMI cable to your TV. Then you use the Time Sleuth itself to measure how much time it took from when the signal is sent to when it's displayed on screen. Each one of these devices shows the exact same millisecond time as if it was just plugged directly into the TV. And yes, I tested every single one of them, so they're all zero latency devices. Also, none of the devices change the video signal or color in any way, except for the devices that are advertised as downscaling. We'll get to that, which means the color signals didn't get changed at all. I was able to verify this by running a PC at 4K 60 with full uncompressed colors directly into a capture card, and then running that same PC through each of these devices into the same compatible capture card, running a full screen software that is a web page a friend of mine is hosting on his site that allows you to see if there are any differences or changes whatsoever, and none of the devices messed with that at all. The only other thing to note is none of these devices, as far as I know, support variable refresh rate or 4K 120. All of the devices here support 4K 60, except when noted otherwise, but I don't have access to any brand new devices that are VRR or 120 Hz. So anything you see here is 4K 60 or below when noted. But other than that, it should sum up pretty much every device you're about to look at. So let's jump in and start with the switches. The first two devices I want to start out reviewing are two HDMI matrix switches. And I'm going to take my time and go over every single detail of both of these, because what I explain here applies to pretty much every other device that we're going to be talking about. So all of the reviews that you're going to see after this in this video are going to be much shorter, because all of the details and information that you'll need to know, I'm going to go through with these two switches. And the first one I want to talk about is from EasyCoo. Now, the basic information on this one is that it's a matrix switch, which means there are 4 inputs and 2 outputs. And you could select which input goes to which output. So input 1 could go to output 1 and output 2, or you could have input 3 go to output 2 and input 4 go to output 1. Whatever suggestion or whatever combination that you want, you could set this up either right here with the main buttons on the front that control each individual output, or in the bundled remote control that it has. The remote control is about as basic as it gets, where you could just select which of the inputs are routed to which of the outputs. Plus, you could just cycle through with the up and down button if that's how you prefer, or if I guess you forget what you have plugged into each. Some of the other interesting features about this are the control options. So you have an IR extender that it comes with right here. In case you want to mount this inside some kind of AV rack or something like that, you could plug this into the back, run the IR sensor around to the front or wherever your rack or setup is, and any of the remote control commands will go right through the IR receiver, so you could hide this unit. It also has RS-232 controls, which means if you have some kind of home automation system with serial protocols, you could tap directly into that with the included connector and just wire that right into your existing setup And that's really going to depend on whatever you have for your setup. This just accepts the commands and changes them. It also has a power port that you could screw in the AC adapter. Almost every other device I'm going to show here uses USB as power, but I thought this was interesting because if you are mounting it in a rack, having something that you could screw down like that is going to be very handy. Normally I just prefer USB, but I think in that scenario, this one would definitely be the better choice just because you could tie it down. The main feature about this switch is a very interesting one, and I think it's what is the reason for it being so expensive. You have the ability to downscale either both or one of the outputs to 1080p from 4K. So here's a very common situation for something like that. You have a modern game console that you're outputting 4K 60, but you have a capture card that's only 1080p 60. So if that's the case, set output 1 to go to your TV and just leave that switch off so you're getting 4K 60. Flip the switch for the second output and send output 2 to your capture card, and that's downscaled to 1080p. That is an excellent feature, and another reason that you might want to use downscaling is for AVR compatibility. While sure, if your AVR is ARC enabled, you could just use that, and I'll discuss what ARC is in a little bit, but if you have an AVR with just standard HDMI inputs, and there are a lot of excellent, really high-end audio receivers out there that just don't have modern HDMI protocols. So you pick up a used one, or maybe you bought one new 10 years ago, and it's not compatible with 4K 60. No problem. Route all your devices through this, send your 4K 60 output to your TV, and then send the downscaled 1080p 60 output to your AVR. It just thinks it's 1080p 60, and it doesn't really matter how the video looks because you're only processing audio. The downscaling does look okay. You can notice a slight bit of a difference, but if you're just doing it for casual streaming, this device is amazing, and of course, for the AVR scenario, the video quality would not matter at all. It also has some basic EDID spoofing, and EDID is a signal that your TV sends down the HDMI port to tell the devices that are plugged into it what it is. So this basic EDID allows you to copy that signal from your TV, force 1080p, or force 4K mode. And all of those options are excellent depending on what you want the source device to see. I think in most cases you might just set it to copy, but the options are there if you need them. They also have the EDID settings presented on the back, which I think is an awesome feature of any device. Why fumble with a user manual when you could just have the functionality printed right here? One of the other advantages is this switch supports EDID spoofing for Dolby Atmos, which is something that I found very handy recently with some AVR testing because I was running some devices to a monitor that definitely wasn't Dolby Atmos compatible, but a receiver that was. So flipping it to the 4K EDID spoofing allowed me to use Dolby Atmos on a receiver that it was meant for, but it just wasn't getting the signal sent because I also had to go through another monitor. One other feature that almost every single other device that I talk about here has is the ability to use things like a PlayStation 3 or maybe an Apple TV or a streaming box through a capture card. So if you ever try to capture PlayStation 3 via its HDMI out, it will not work, and this will enable compatibility with that, which is excellent. The other downsides of this, and almost every other device that I show here, is it does not pass CEC controls through. So if you're using something like an Apple TV, and when you're done you hold down the power button and it turns off the Apple TV and your receiver and any of the other devices like your TV, this does not pass that through. And in fact, pretty much none of the other ones I've shown does as well. Now, you can do some kind of internal modifications to these, but it's kind of complicated. You have to solder to small points. So unless you're an expert, I would really just say that these devices are not CEC control compatible. Other than that, this thing performs really well, but it's really designed for people who need control options or downscaling options. You could get much cheaper devices if all you're looking for is a matrix switch or Dolby Atmos spoofing or any of the other stuff. I really think this one's a huge winner, and you're going to know if you're the type of person that needs the 1080p downscaling. So let's move on to the next matrix switch, because I think that might be a better choice for most people. The next device is another HDMI matrix switch with a different set of main features. It's much cheaper, but does offer quite a bit, so let's go through everything that you get. It comes with a USB power adapter, and as well as another simple remote. Just like the other one, you could select whichever inputs you want or just cycle through them for whichever outputs. It's another 4x2 HDMI matrix switch, and a lot of the same features are there. It does allow for PS3 support for capturing. It does not support CEC pass-through, but there are a few things that sets this one apart, and the main feature is its audio extraction. So this switch allows you to extract the digital audio as well as have a basic digital to analog converter, a DAC, built in. I used something called MD Fourier testing in order to ensure that this was not changing the signal at all. So basically, I've done a bunch of streams with one of the creators of MD Fourier and one of the main contributors describing what that is, how to use it, how to run the test yourself, but here is the basic overview. You pass an audio signal through an HDMI device that is MD Fourier certified, and then you capture the extracted audio through an audio capture card that is also MD Fourier certified. And then you take those two files and compare them to each other with the custom software. If there are any changes at all, those changes will be listed, and you can see if the device passes the signal through properly or if it muddies or ruins the signal. The digital audio outputs of this switch are pretty much perfect, and this is an excellent device if you need to extract digital audio from your HDMI signal. Now, all of the normal caveats of SPDIF or Toastlink coax outputs apply. 2.0 audio will pass through perfectly, and as you get into 7-channel audio, it will get compressed just like any SPDIF device, not just this switch. So those confines are still there. However, if you're passing 2.0 channel audio, this does an excellent job. Another neat feature of this is the DAC, the digital to analog audio converter. But you need to take that into context. If you have a really good stereo system and you're into audio and music, then this is going to sound terrible and you're going to want to invest into a much better DAC device for it. Good DACs range from 150 to thousands and thousands, so you can decide how much of an audiophile you are. However, if you have a basic 2-channel sound setup, or if you're connecting this to a computer monitor and you have just basic computer speakers, or if you just need a temporary solution, this is an excellent DAC, because if you take it inside the context of a fairly inexpensive matrix switch, you could consider this one of those, oh, by the way, what an awesome extra feature. So as far as extra features go, it's very cool. Comparing it to high-end DACs, it fails, but I still praise this one because you get a lot for your money, and there are many scenarios in which this DAC is more than good enough. The other features that this supports are much more EDID spoofing features, and just like the other device, it has all of the features listed on the bottom right here, so you could set the EDID to either copy whatever your TV has or set it to any one of these settings. So if EDID control is important to you, this is another good one. The only downside of this switch is none of the EDID spoofing allows for Dolby Atmos audio, so if you need to use this with a different kind of setup, you're going to have to rely on copying using all of the settings as you see right here and having your receiver or your TV send that through, which it does not always work reliably, so if Dolby Atmos is a very important feature for you, you're definitely going to want to try this immediately after buying and then send it back if you're not able to get it working. The other interesting feature that this offers is ARC control, audio return channel. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in the next section. However, if you do have a device like a receiver, or if you want to pass into your TV and then have your TV go out to your receiver, you could pass the audio return channel through this. Now, the other device that I just shown also advertises that as a feature, but it doesn't have any ARC enable button. And with a lot of these cheaper devices, sometimes the advertised feature doesn't match. So if you were looking to run ARC through a matrix switch, I would kind of lean towards this one because this is a feature that you could enable through the button here, through the button on the remote, and it's advertised right on the device as it being working. Whereas the other one, the EasyCoo switch, I see the labels in the listing, but there's no way to enable or disable it. It does also look like ARC is only available through the first output port, but other than that, it should work well, so you should either connect this directly to your TV or to your receiver's ARC port. Since I just mentioned ARC, or the Audio Return Channel, I figured I would talk about this device next, an HDMI audio extractor that also supports ARC. So I'll start with its basic overview. It's powered by a USB cable, however it has a barrel connector on the other side, which is weird because it would have made a lot more sense to just include an HDMI port. But its very basic functionality is you connect a device like streaming box, game console, whatever. You could set the EDID to basic spoofing, so pass through 5.1 or 2.0 audio, which might be helpful depending on where your audio is going. And then you take the HDMI out and send it to a display, and then it extracts audio. So this is probably designed for a scenario like you have a computer monitor with no speakers or terrible speakers, but you want to just pass everything through and then extract the audio on it. The audio extraction is terrible in most cases, though. The analog audio out is some of the worst I've ever tested. The DAC that's built into this, the digital audio converter, is pretty terrible, and even the digital audio extraction has some noise on it. I used MD Fourier testing once again to prove this, and while I'm not sure it's noise that you would really hear unless you had very good speakers or an excellent headphone amp with a digital input, it's still worth noting that this is the only device tested that has different digital audio than what was inputted to it. So definitely a red flag right there. But the other interesting thing about it is its ARC capabilities. So the way that most people use ARC, and certainly the way that I appreciate it, is you have a setup where you're watching TV normally through your TV speakers, and then you want to enable your amp and have something like a surround sound system or a really nice 2-channel system. And if your amp is ARC enabled, you connect the output of your amp to the input of your TV that's labeled ARC on the side as well. And the moment you turn your amp on, it automatically sends uncompressed audio down the HDMI line to your amp, but not only that, it also allows you to control the volume of your amp with this standard remote. So let's just say you have something like an Apple TV and you program that to control your TV's volume. When you grab your amp's remote and turn on the amp, you could put the amp remote away and continue to just still use the Apple TV remote to control the amp's volume. And then when you turn the whole system off, that should go off as well. So ARC in general, when it works, is awesome. What I don't really understand is how it would apply to this adapter. Because if you turn on the ARC switch, it definitely sends the ARC command to your TV, but it doesn't control the volume on any of the extracted audio. I'm assuming it just sends the ARC commands through the output here. But I'm not really sure why that would be necessary. I think the only use case for a device like this is if you have an ARC amp, but you still want digital audio extraction anyway, even though most amps that would have an HDMI ARC port would most likely have other outputs as well. So I don't really recommend this one in any use case whatsoever. This particular device didn't perform well, and I don't really get the ARC functionality of it. However, I wanted to talk about it here, both in case you do have some weird niche scenario where this would be the perfect device, even with its mediocre audio extraction on the digital side, and also just to kind of explain what ARC is and how it might apply to the other devices that you've seen here. The next device I want to show is one of my favorite devices here today. I've purchased quite a few of these because of how good they worked and for some pretty specific scenarios that I'll describe here. It is an HDMI 2.0B switch that just comes with an USB power and an instruction manual, and the device itself is pretty straightforward. It allows you to take one HDMI input, output to two HDMI outputs, and extract audio. The digital audio extraction is once again near perfect, if not perfect, and much like the switch that I showed earlier, this analog digital to analog converter output is very respectable. Once again, if you're going to be comparing it to a high-end DAC or if you're going to be listening on a really high-end setup, this is not good. But if you're just using it temporarily, using it for testing, or if you have a scenario where audio doesn't really matter, you just need to grab 2.0 channel audio, that DAC is very respectable considering what you get for the price in one package here. It's also powered by micro USB and has some basic EDID control, copy from your TV set to 5.0 or set to 2.0. And the 2.0 setting is extremely helpful if you just need to grab some analog audio output. That way you don't really need to worry about passing any kind of 5.1 or surround sound audio through this. Now, the reason I like this so much is because of its use with capture cards. This has allowed quite a few things to happen. Much like the other devices, it is compatible with the PlayStation 3 and streaming boxes, so this will fix any compatibility issues you may have had in your capture card, but also setting it to 2.0 channel EDID and using the digital audio extraction is really great if you have a capture card that's bad with audio or doesn't support audio at all. If you're a user of the DataPath Vision capture cards, the E1, E1S, or even E2, this is probably the perfect device for you to pick up, because not only does it make things compatible with the outputs, you can send one to your monitor and one to your capture card. Not only does it extract audio for you, but it acts as an HDMI device as well for both power and signal. Now, if you're not using a DataPath Vision capture card, this means nothing to you and you could just ignore what I'm about to say. But if you do have one, you may have noticed that sometimes you plug in an HDMI device to the DVI port and you get green speckles all over the screen. Plugging your device into this first, and then just using a quality HDMI to DVI cable on the output side with a shorter cable, I like to use 3 to 5 foot cables for that, that will completely clear up the green speckle issue. So just as an HDMI splitter with audio extractor, this thing's excellent, but if you're an owner of a DataPath Vision, I would kind of call this one a must-buy. The only downsides to this, the EDID spoofing does not allow for Dolby Atmos, so once again, it may or may not work in pass-through mode. It does not pass CEC controls through as well, just like none of the other devices here. Overall, though, this device is absolutely excellent, and if you're using this with a capture card, you don't have to worry about anything from the digital audio output, the video is clean, and there's no lag whatsoever. The next device is also made by the company EZCoo with similar functionality to the matrix switch that I showed earlier. This box only includes a USB power and manual, but you don't really need any of that, except USB power might be handy, because once again, EZCoo has written any of the EDID settings or functionality right on the device, which I am a very big fan of. Much like the matrix switch, the functionality is pretty basic in that you could have HDMI input with 2 HDMI outputs, and you could select downscaling on one or either of them. So much like the scenario before, you could have your PlayStation 3, your streaming box, or whatever else, or even modern consoles outputting in 4K. You don't have to worry about capture card compatibility as far as signal compatibility goes, but if you're playing in 4K and want to capture 1080p, send one output to your TV, and then flick on the downscaling switch for your capture card, and you're all set. Also, this device has some basic EDID spoofing of either copying it directly from your TV, forcing it to 4K 5.1, or 4K 7.1, including Dolby Atmos. I recently used this device to do exactly that, spoof Dolby Atmos, just to get around a weird issue I was having with the receiver, and found it incredibly handy. Everything's listed right on the bottom once again, if you want to know any of the functionalities on the fly. Like the other devices, this does not support CEC control pass-through whatsoever. I'm not sure if it passes ARC, audio return channel. It's not listed as one of its features, so I would absolutely double check on that, or once again just buy through the links I've provided here so you can return it if it does not. Overall though, if you needed a downscaling switch or 1-to-2 splitter with any of the extra features that I just talked about, this one is for you. It's not very expensive, and it's performed incredibly well ever since I picked it up. This next device is another HDMI 1x2 splitter by the company AVideo. Yes, that's actually their name, AVideo. And it comes with USB power with an AC adapter. It comes with a cheap HDMI cable. Not sure how much I would trust a free or cheap cable, but certainly good for lower resolutions. And a little cheat sheet instruction manual thing if you need it right here. This device is pretty unique in that there's one HDMI input, USB power, and 2 HDMI outs, and nothing else. That is it. There is nothing else on this device. However, if whatever device you plug into one of the outputs is listed as only a 1080p device, or at least not listed as a 4K device in its EDID, this will automatically downscale on port 2. Now, I was incredibly skeptical when I bought this, and I just thought there's no way this thing could work reliably, but it did. And I think it's just because if it doesn't specifically detect a 4K EDID, it defaults to 1080p on output too. So if you don't care about any extra features, you don't need anything, you just want an HDMI splitter that's compatible with PlayStation 3 and automatically downscaled to your 1080p capture card, you could probably just pick this one up, power it right off of your computer, and never think about anything again. This is definitely the perfect minimalist splitter with downscaling function. The next device I want to show is another one that I've been using for a very long time, but I'll start by saying that it's mostly outdated and not what I would recommend for most people watching, but it does have a few features that somebody might be interested in, so I wanted to show it anyway. First of all, it's a standard 1x2 HDMI splitter with audio extraction. It's powered by an AC adapter with a barrel plug, not a USB connection, which is usually annoying for me. The HDMI splitter section also works with PlayStation 3 and streaming boxes, so that's a nice feature. And it has basic EDID spoofing, so pass through, force 2 channel, or go to 5.1. However, it's got a few things about it that are worth mentioning. First, the bad. The DAC, the digital to analog conversion on this, is pretty bad. It's not as bad as the audio extractor that I showed earlier, but it's not nearly as good as some of those other devices that I showed. And I really would not recommend this unless you absolutely just need a quick and dirty stereo 2.0 audio extraction. It's really not something I'd recommend for most people. The digital audio extraction is fine. You shouldn't notice any difference for 2-channel or I guess even up to 5.1 channel audio through it. However, compatibility is what's worth talking about. This is a 1080p 60 with 3D compatibility splitter. And having something that's a bit older sometimes increases compatibility with older devices. The number one device that comes in mind for me would be using this with the Mister in its direct video mode, allowing you to send one output to your capture card, the other output to your direct video device, and then if you want to, even extract the digital audio from that. So I have seen the opposite. I've seen this not compatible with stuff that the other devices are, but wanted to mention that in case you wanted a different solution. Maybe you've tried the other devices and they're just not compatible with your setup. As long as you're only going up to 1080p 60 on the input side, you might want to switch to one of these just to see if it'll solve your issues. Overall, I would definitely suggest the other ones that I talked about, but at least this is here as an option if you need it. And the very last device to talk about today, the exact same switch that I just talked about, but no digital audio extraction. Not really sure why you would want this over the other if you were going to try a ViewHD device other than simply compatibility differences from the other ones, but up to 1080p 60 with 3D, compatibility should be decent for those signals, so here's just one more option, but once again, I'd probably recommend any of the other things before I would buy this one. Well, that's just about it for this time. I'll eventually swing back with another video talking about HDMI to analog or analog to HDMI converters, DACs or ADCs, but I wanted to keep it mostly digital for this time. Now, if you want to keep videos like this going and you want to support the channel, you could do so through monthly services or simply by buying the exact same products you were going to buy anyway for the same price, but we get a small kickback through affiliate codes. Let me show you how to do that. Simply go to RetroRGB.com and click on support. If you'd like to support monthly, all of those links are right above, but if you scroll down to the eBay and Amazon links, you can click on either one of those and it'll bring you to the main page. I like copying and pasting everything after the question mark just to ensure that I'm able to keep that code going. But once you do that, just go and search for whatever it is that you were going to buy anyway. It will be the same price. The price will be identical to what it was without this affiliate code. But when you're checking out, maybe consider pasting that code back in again just to be sure, and we'll get a few pennies of the sale at no cost to you. While that sends a very small amount our way, all of that stuff adds up and makes a big difference at the end of the month, which is really part of what's keeping all of this going. If you love what you do and you want to support in other ways, please consider signing up for the monthly services, because those are really what's keeping the website, the weekly podcast, the insane amount of behind-the-scenes research and development, and all of the free consulting work I do with people in the tech and retro gaming world. So thank you very much for watching. Please consider subscribing and signing up for any of the stuff that we're a part of, and I hope to see you again soon.